However low you fall, you must never lose hope. Exactly 6 months after Sardin's death, I sank to the bottom, deep into the abyss. In vain did I tell myself that he had not left me, that he still protected me from the other world which he had now inhabited. In vain did I remind myself over and over again that I'd promised him to be brave. I couldn't stand it. I began to take drugs. Surely I was marked out forever as a result. This was on top of all the rest, all the horrible and sordid things that had already happened to me, because in any case I'd had a bad start in life. Perhaps this is why my health has been undermined, and I'll surely die before my time, although I've undergone a cure. But drugs made my life into hell for 4 years. Yes, for 4 years I lived almost like an animal or a madwoman. Nothing existed for me beyond the moment I was given my injection and felt at last the soothing effect of the drug. My friends have seen me foaming at the mouth, clinging to the bars of my bed as I demanded my dose of morphine. They've seen me standing in the wings, injecting myself rapidly through my skirt and my stockings, for without the injection I could never have gone on stage. I could never have sung. And yet nothing, not even my worst moments of despair, ever stopped me from singing. The day before I die, I shall still be thinking of a song. And if I had the choice, I'd prefer to collapse on stage while singing and never get up again. If I remember the time when I was no more than a remnant of humanity, I do so because I want to warn those who, like me, after a grief too hard to bear, try to forget through drugs or alcohol. In my case, nobody tried to warn me. In fact, people encouraged me along the downward path. Marcel was no longer there. When I accepted my first injection, I didn't know what was coming to me. Besides, I didn't have it deliberately in order to drug myself. Destiny, my evil destiny, lay in wait for me once more, as though it were written somewhere that whenever la Piaf was beginning to get out of trouble, she was forced into it once again. I had been involved in a car accident near Terrasson. I've often regretted that it didn't kill me. I would have been reunited with the man whom I couldn't forget. Perhaps I hadn't suffered enough. The car was a heap of scrap iron. I was taken out covered with cuts, and in addition I had a fractured arm and broken ribs. I found myself in a hospital bed. Each time I was moved, the pain was so intense that I screamed. It was then that a nurse gave me my first injection. All at once the pain vanished, and I felt amazingly happy. As soon as the effect of the injection wore off, I began to suffer the pain again. I demanded another injection. They made me wait as long as possible, but the pain was so intense that in the end they gave it to me. I was lost. However, I was taken back by ambulance to my apartment in Paris. There I no longer had a nurse to supervise me. I begged all my friends to find morphine for me. It was essential for my body now. I had become an addict. They all refused, all except one friend, Janine. She came to me every day. She brought me my shot, hiding in her handbag. As soon as she had closed the door, I would get out of bed and go on all fours to find the syringe, which I hid it in turn under my bed, inside the gramophone pickup, or behind the bath, so that my friends wouldn't find it. Breathlessly, I would order Janine, "Give it to me quickly." Then, half closing my eyes, I would plunge the needle into my flesh. Immediately I felt again alive. Afterwards I used to lie stretched out on my bed in a state of stupor, but calm at last. I spent a fortune in my search for the drug. I can't think what I would have done in order to have my shot if I had not had the money. But I had lots of it. I was earning millions, and the drug dealers were well aware of it. They took advantage of it. I saw strange, disturbing people come to my apartment. I knew that they were robbing me. I knew that they were exploiting my weaknesses, but I couldn't put up any resistance. It lasted for a year. I had become unrecognizable. I had reached the point when, despite the injections and ever stronger doses, the drug no longer satisfied me, and in any case there was no more room on my body for the injections. My thighs and my arms were covered with huge swellings. I would probably have gone mad if, in a moment of lucidity, I had not crossed the threshold of a clinic which specialized in curing drug abuse. I remember how frightened I was when the nurse came towards me. She was so strong. I was so weak and feeble. I was a shadow of my former self. She took hold of me, undressed me, searched me, and made me take a bath. I was told later that many patients who came to this kind of clinic would hide drugs in their hair or under their armpits so that they would not go short of them during their stay. I hadn't done that. When the treatment was over, I came back home. I should not have done so. I wasn't really cured. I didn't know, or rather, I didn't fully understand what was in store for me. Yet Dr. Migaud, who looked after me, had warned me, a cure of this sort is always followed by mental depression. I thought I was strong enough to get over it, but I didn't manage to do so. I felt paralyzed. I felt all the time that there were hands around my throat about to strangle me. Sometimes my anguish was unbearable. I had nightmares. I would wake up screaming. During the day I remained flaked out in my armchair, incapable of getting up or walking from one room to another. Loulou Barrier, my impresario, came to see me every day. I could see from his tearful eyes how deeply he pitied me. I was a wreck. One day I was so much aware of this that I decided to kill myself. The black joke had lasted long enough. It was time to ring down the curtain. If not, I risked spending the rest of my days in a straitjacket. I got everything ready, the glass and the poison. I only had to drink it. And at that moment, a cheerful group of people burst into my apartment, simply to say good night to me. Once more, there was a miracle in my life. At least that's what I thought it was. I didn't take that poison. I asked to see a doctor immediately. They brought one to me. Listen, I said to him, I've got contracts to honor, and look at me. I'm a wreck. I can barely talk. Can you do something? He prescribed injections for me. He said that they would stimulate me. In fact, as soon as I was given the first one, I felt I had come back to life again, and for a very good reason. I'd been given the drug again. The doctor didn't know about my problem, and I lied to him. I pretended that I didn't know that the injections contained morphine. They allowed me on stage again, to sing again, to satisfy my public and to earn the money I needed to live the way I wanted. It didn't take long this time before I was once more drugged to the hilt, arriving at my dressing room with a swollen face and a blank look. I would put on my makeup as though in a dream. Then I'd wait for the knock on my door and the call, Edith, you're on. I would send the dresser out immediately and give myself a shot. One evening I tried to manage without it. You must cure yourself on your own, I'd thought. It was ghastly. On stage I was blinded by the spotlights. My forehead was covered with sweat. My heart was racing madly. I had to cling to the microphone, or I would have collapsed. I began to sing, but very soon I stopped short. I couldn't remember the words of my song. There was a long silence, and then I heard shouting. the audience. They were jeering at me. I burst into tears. "It's not my fault," I stammered. "It's not my fault. Forgive me." Then, for the second time, I went back to the clinic. After 4 days, I thought my head would burst open. I begged in vain to be given a shot. Then during the night, in my dressing gown, I ran away from the clinic. I went past the startled porter, jumped into a taxi, and went home to my apartment to give myself a shot. I didn't listen to my friends, who wanted to save me. I sent away the doctors, who also wanted to get me off the drug. And all at once, in spite of the wretched state which I had to admit I was in, I decided to go on tour with the Super Circus. This was in May 1954. I shall never forget the next 3 months, the suffering I endured. I saw nothing of the towns we passed through. Not a single face from those towns has remained in my memory. And for good reason. I was no more than a sort of mindless puppet. Each time we left for a new place, my secretary used to drag me to the car, and I would immediately fall into a kind of sleepy stupor. When we arrived at the next venue, they would haul me into my room and put me to bed. Then I'd wait for Janine, who went to Paris every week to bring me my new ration of the drug. I was in such a state that on some evenings I would mix up the words of my songs or invent new ones. My musicians had to perform miracles in order to catch up with me. The infernal tour came to an end at Cholet. After my last song, Lou Barrier and my secretary wrapped me up in a blanket and carried me to the car. We drove through the night. At dawn, for the 3rd time in 3 years, I entered the detoxification clinic. Dr. Migaud greeted me sadly. "You, again." "This time," I replied, "it's the last time. Either I'm cured or I'll kill myself." During the first few days, they gave me an injection whenever I asked for it. Then they reduced the number of shots. It was from that moment that my organism, which had been poisoned through and through, began to cause me suffering. At first they'd given me 10 shots a day, then 4, 1 in the morning when I woke up, a second one at noon, another in the afternoon, and finally the last one before I went to sleep. But the nurses gradually replaced the drug with a harmless product. Sometimes I did not notice it, but when I felt that injection gave me no relief, I would fly into a terrible rage because I was being cheated. I would sweep everything off the bedside table. I would get up and, like a fury, smash everything in my room until the nurses got me under control. It was horrible. It was horrible. I was like a wild animal whose prey had been taken away. Every day I was subjected to a complete search of my room, my clothes, and my body. The staff of these clinics know only too well the diabolical tricks used by addicts to hide the poisons which first degrade them and then kill them. At last came the final day of this 3rd attempt at a cure. That day I was to have no injection at all. It was the longest and most horrible day of my life. From 11 a.m. until 5 p.m., I screamed like a madwoman. I chewed the sheets. I wept. I tossed and turned on my bed. I moaned and I foamed at the mouth. I was mad with this terrible need. My whole body cried out for the drug that it wanted. A terrible struggle took place within me. But I did want to be cured, really cured. And I shouted out the fact. I struggled and I threw myself down on the floor, scratching it with my nails. People who have not known this martyrdom can't understand. They must think that I'm exaggerating. Dr. Migaud spoke to me gently. "Do you want an injection?" he asked. "The last one." 4 nurses were holding me down on my bed to stop me from throwing myself out the window. I remember how I replied to the doctor. "No, I hate drugs. I want to be cured. But how did I find the strength to call out those words? Through a supernatural presence? I insist that this was the case, even if everyone laughs at me. It was a presence that saved me in extremis from myself. My life has been strewn with miracles like this, until the day, no doubt, when heaven will be too exhausted to save me from one last catastrophe. The presence, it was a face which appeared suddenly before my eyes as I writhed on my bed. It was a face which saved me this time. My mother's face. That mother who had abandoned me when I was 2 months old. She whom I found again 15 years later in a wretched room in Pigalle, stretched out on her bed, moaning, "I want my shot. I want my shot." My poor lamentable mother. I tried 4 times to make her take a cure, but each time she slipped back into her vice again. My mother died one evening in August 1945, alone in her room, while injecting herself with an overdose of morphine. Yes, it was the face and the memory of my mother which pulled me back from the abyss, that day when I was hovering at the edge. In the evening, all my strength abandoned me. I lay motionless on my bed, my eyes closed. I could breathe only with difficulty. I thought I was dead. Dr. Migaud spoke to me. "Thank you, Edith. You are the first person I've cured of this ghastly evil. In all my personal life, I've never really saved a drug addict before now, and I was beginning to lose confidence in myself. You are my first victory." I was cured, but my sufferings were not over. I still had to live through 4 more stations on the way to my Calvary. The doctors had warned me, "Take care. After the addiction is cured, a need for the drug makes itself felt again on the last day of the 3rd, 6th, 12th, and 18th months afterward." I waited these days in anguish. For 8 months, alone in my apartment, I lived in terror of becoming an addict again. I stayed in my darkened room. I didn't want to see anyone, but one day I opened my door and my shutters again. The sun shone into my room, and I began to live once more.